Welcome to Bamaadzaje Ginonindwa. This podcast is produced by the Communications Department at the Anishinabek Nation. We will be focusing on the issues and initiatives in Anishinabek Nation territory. I'm your host, Lisa Abel. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, or FASD, is a lifelong disability that affects the brain and body of people who are exposed to alcohol in the womb. Each person with FASD has both strengths and challenges and will need special supports to help them succeed with many different parts of their daily lives. Our Anishinabek Nation Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Program works to increase the general level of awareness and knowledge of community members about FASD by offering unique, culturally based programs and workshops, providing specialized training and resources to build capacity, and political advocacy to broaden the scope of FASD services for First Nations. Our FASD program is informed by our Anishinaabe perspective. As Anishinaabe people, we believe that our children are the heart of our nations and the carriers of our dreams and aspirations for the future. Every child has a gift and is considered sacred. It is our responsibility to nurture and protect them so that they may fulfill the path laid out for them by the Creator. Anishinabek people living with FASD have a right to be treated with Zagidawin, love, and Minadendomawin, respect. In this episode, I'll be speaking with our two Anishinabek Nation FASD regional workers. Lynda Banning, our Northern Superior FASD Regional Worker, is located in Fort William First Nation, and Chochi Knott, the Southeast Southwest FASD Regional Worker, is based in Curve Lake First Nation. Lynda, Chochi, and the FASD Program Coordinator, Michelle Irvine, are gearing up for International FASD Day on September 9th. First celebrated in 1999, this day is devoted to raising awareness about FASD. The initiative has since expanded to include all of the month of September as FASD month. In our conversation, Chochi and Lynda describe how FASD is experienced throughout the lifespan, how to access diagnostic services on and off reserve, and how they help communities reconnect with our Anishinaabe culture and teachings as a way to heal from intergenerational trauma and take on the shared responsibility of bringing new life into our communities. Lynda and Chochi also share how important advocacy is to dispel the stigma around FASD and ensure that all First Nations people and families living with FASD have access to equitable resources they need to be successful and empowered. I'm here today with Lynda Banning and Chochi Knott. So miigwech, Lynda and Chochi, and welcome to Bamaadzaje Ginonindwa. Thank you for taking part in the podcast.
Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Would you like to share a little bit about yourselves and what brings you to your roles as fetal alcohol spectrum disorder workers with the Anishinabek Nation?
Miigwech. I'll go first. I've been working with the FASD program at the Anishinabek Nation for just over 16 years. And I actually started with an education background. I was a certified primary junior teacher, and I worked with AEI first for an 8-month contract. And I loved working with the communities and working for, at the time, Union of Ontario Indians. And so I really wanted to get back working for the organization. And a position came up for the Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Regional Worker, and I applied. And I was successful in the interview process and been here ever since. Special education was actually one of a courses I did with my primary junior teaching certification. So I did have a passion for special education, and it went well because of what we're expected to do in the program, teaching, educating, workshops, sessions, assisting. And most common within our program, there is a background area that our workers, our manager, our team has a passion for. The previous FASD worker in the Curve Lake, Southeast, Southwest region, her passion was justice. So I kind of picked up the reins from that as well to keep doing her work that she did, and then do a focus in the schools. So that's my background with the FASD.
Miigwech, Chochi. Lynda.
So I've been around for a long time now, and I started out as a child and family counselor years and years ago, and we would see some behaviors that were interesting in the children, but we never quite knew what was going on with them sometimes. And so that's how long I've been around. And then I got into education, and I started to look at FASD. I was asked to sit on the FASD and Child Nutrition Program planning group for Health Canada. And so that was really when I started to learn about FASD. And through that, I've got to go to a conference and learned even more about how the trajectory of individuals living with FASD might go in a negative way. And an opportunity came up to participate in a parent-child assistance program training in Seattle, Washington. And so I participated in that. And from that, I thought this is a very, very important subject, and that our communities really need to know about it. And me, educated and working in the field, hadn't had a lot of information about it. So that was where I started to realize that it was something that I wanted to devote my time to. And when the position came up with the Anishinaabe Nation, Union of Ontario Indians at the time, of the FASD worker, I applied for it, and I've been doing that now since 2006. And I very much enjoy my position, and I am really happy to see a lot of the changes that have happened over the years and how awareness has been raised, and the focus is on prevention and realizing the importance of that. Miigwech.
Miigwech. So you're both bringing some really strong perspectives to the work, the community, the family, education, and also how our understandings of FASD has changed over the years. I guess for our listeners, can we start by defining what is FASD? How do we understand that?
So Lynda and I talked about this together, and as each of us have our own journey with the program, FASD has had its own journey as well. And what FASD is, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. It's important to note that it's a spectrum. It presents itself from mild to severe, and no one individual is the same. And that's why it's a spectrum as well. You know, there's no two people with FASD is going to present itself the same way. Years ago, they came up with the term fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and it's definitely developed in its terminology. But as it stands now, even with diagnosis, we are coining it the spectrum. And so we've dropped a lot of those specific terms, and we actually have a individual with FASD that helps us out a lot with our program. He's been the MC at both of our conferences that we've had, our annual conference. And he was talking too with the terminology, and that it's fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, but he himself doesn't identify as a fetus. It's not only the fetus and the babies and children that live with FASD. FASD is a lifelong neurodivergent. So there's no growing out. People don't start to live without FASD. It's what they live with for life. And so that's why it's a struggle for those adults living with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, because they're living with it as well. It's through your whole lifespan. So we're moving that terminology as well, and we're trying at the support and respect of our funders that we want to encompass neurodivergence. So the other disorders as well, all brain-based, so that we can support all individuals. A lot of the times we get hung up on that diagnosis of FASD, and so many of our individuals living with FASD are either misdiagnosed or they haven't even been diagnosed.
That's interesting. So I already have so many questions, right? Chochi, you're mentioning that this community experiencing the spectrum, they're moving forward with really defining themselves what FASD means. But then how does FASD present throughout the lifespan? Can you kind of describe it from, say, birth, throughout the lifespan? What do we really see?
When we're talking about like across the lifespan, so what we talk about is the good life teaching in our Anishinaabe culture. And so in our belief system, men and women are pregnant together. And so they start even before the baby is conceived to work toward bringing a healthy child into the world that can live a good life. And so they do that by abstaining from alcohol like 3 months before conception. But also when we're bringing our children onto their medicine wheel, the things that we do while we're pregnant, like alcohol and smoking and marijuana and other drugs and any chemicals within the environment, they can impact that child's whole life cycle journey. So they start already at a bit of a disadvantage when they get onto their medicine wheel journey. So trying to encourage people to think about that and to recognize the importance of their roles and the responsibility that they're taking on.
Yeah, and prior to, we really heavily encourage planned pregnancies. The sperm has a life cycle of 3 months. Women should be taking a prenatal vitamin 3 months prior to conception. So we in our sessions heavily encourage family planning. So once we're blessed with a fetus, during the 40 weeks of pregnancy, the central nervous system, the brain is always developing. And so by protecting that fetus, we as FASD education and prevention workers try to encourage zero alcohol or zero substance use during that pregnancy, because the brain is always developing. Different parts of the fetus develop throughout those 40 weeks, but the brain develops every moment within that 40 weeks and beyond. We know in research that the brain develops well into your 20s. You're still getting brain development.
So in infancy, we might see troubles with eating, sleeping. It can kind of be unidentified until they start to get into school, and then they start to struggle more with structure and routine and getting along in that environment. And that's where they might come to the attention of service providers in the medical profession and start to look at what's going on with them once they have those struggles. Teen years, I mean, those things can continue on through their lifespan. And so when they get transitioning from, say, grade 8 into high school is another period where they'll struggle because they're changing the routine and the environment that they've gotten so used to over the years. And now it's a new situation and circumstance for them. And so they might experience some added difficulties during that time, that transition period. Sometimes individuals with FASD don't do well as far as getting through the school system and graduating. Sometimes they'll get in trouble with the law because they're a little bit more easily influenced. So people can take advantage of them sometimes in their life and maybe get them to do things that they know aren't a good idea. So we'll get this person to do it because they will.
And we do see as well that individuals with FASD can have a misdiagnosis. So during those baby and child and youth time, we do see behavioral issues as well that sometimes get misdiagnosed with ADHD or that it is behavior. And we tend to think of it as not that they won't, but that they can't. They physically don't have the capabilities of. And so this can present a lot of frustration for those individuals with FASD. And the fact that they can't do something, then we need to understand that it's not that they don't want to or that they're trying to be argumentative. So focusing on the ability as opposed to the dis. Just
Mhm.
it's the way we look at those words. And
Mhm.
that differently piece is we always say that with individuals as well. You try differently, not harder. So if something isn't working, you're going to try from a different venue. And that way that we've worked with different families, different workers, we've met different individuals with FASD, we've gained such a wide range of strategies that if this doesn't work, why not try this? And then connecting them together, then there's online groups as well, like on Facebook, that help caregivers work together. And this is what my teen's going through, or this is what my parent is going through. How am I going to support them? Mm-hmm.
And then, like, as they age, they could experience health problems and independence and parenting and struggling with those responsibilities might be a challenge for them. So, a lot of the people diagnosed with FASD are in the child welfare system and involved in the child welfare system. And so it kind of just carries on from that. So when they go to have children, those children might also be involved in the child welfare system, regardless of whether they're influenced by alcohol during pregnancy or not. It could be just a matter of the parents struggling with how to manage that responsibility and how to manage the responsibility of paying rent, of going to appointments and things like that.
They do struggle throughout the lifespan with finances and independent living. And so luckily now our homes have been and us as a people, we've never been a nuclear family. A lot of our communities are designed where all our extended relatives live on the same road. That's how it is here in Curve Lake. Our roads are named after our families. And so it helps those individuals with FASD, to be close with their family. And even though they may have, a in-law suite or something like that, it still gives them that independence, but they're still close enough that they have the support of their family as well. And if an individual with FASD already has a hard time with memory, it's definitely going to be present through that later life, that adult, elder stage of the lifespan as well.
And now we have adults who are saying, what about me as an adult? And where do I fall into all of this? But they never were really looked at. And then there was a young group of people, individuals living with FASD, who attended Anishinaabe Nation FASD conference, actually, and got together and decided that they needed to examine all of the different things that were happening in their lives. So they saw some commonalities in their health situations that they wanted to look at. So they went out with the help of one of the mums and got a grant and did some research, international research on finding out what does happen to an individual as they age. And one of the things that was a little bit concerning was they didn't find a lot of people who were over a certain age, like into their 60s. So, and then there was some kidney problems, and they found a lot of health problems that were pretty common among individuals as they age.
And then, like Lynda was saying, with those studies, it will be interesting to see how the physical impairments, the issues with the kidney, the issues with liver, metabolism will be affected in their later life. The list goes on. Like it's very extensive.
From a practical sense, how are families accessing diagnosis or other FASD related services, on reserve and off reserve?
So for Lynda and I, Can FASD is a wonderful resource. Can FASD, they have a list of the diagnostic clinics by province. So if you have relatives in other provinces, you can access that list for the diagnostic clinics. There's also fetal alcohol spectrum disorder programs and services Ontario.ca. And as we know, Anishinaabe Nation is all Ontario. So there are Canadian and provincial services that help with the diagnosis. We have very limited Indigenous specific diagnostic clinics. We have Anishinaabe Health, Toronto down here, that helps with diagnosis as well, like navigation. We also have SOHAC, which is the Southern Ontario Aboriginal Health Access Center. And then there's healing lodges as well, like Anatig Healing Lodge. All of our Anishinaabe services, they help to support with FASD, but not diagnosis. Like we have to externally advocate and send people to diagnosis clinics. And then, Lynda, did you want to speak to like Lake Huron, Northern Superior region?
For the Northern Superior region, I could say that we have Northwest Health Center. So they're the ones who do the diagnoses for this region. And then closer to Sault Ste. Marie and Sudbury area, maybe would access some of the clinics. So Northwest Health Center for this area. And it's a non-Indigenous center, so it's Western focused, and they deal with Indigenous people from our First Nations.
Telehealth has been supportive for our communities in our northern area so that they don't have to travel for so much of it, because a diagnosis takes a team. So there's about 5 professionals that help with that diagnosis process. And it's not just an appointment that you can go into for a day and be done in a couple hours. It's quite a lengthy process.
Can you go a little bit into that? Like who would be these people in this team?
So you'd need a pediatrician, psychologist, occupational therapist, social worker, a teacher could be present, and then the caregivers, like a trustee or a parent, adoptive parent, foster parent, someone like that would be all encompassing of the team.
And you're saying like it's different steps, right? It's not something that you can just fill out a questionnaire or have one appointment.
That's right. There'll be a psychoanalysis, and then the occupational therapist, there'll be a physical exam from the physician, and then statements and observations as well. It's full rounded because it's an all body diagnosis. It affects us, our mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. So it's all encompassing when it comes to that diagnosis. And then there may be those diagnostic clinics listed, but there's also wait lists as well. Because the more education and prevention that we get out there, the more people are understanding and wondering, self-identifying, that may be me. So I've done a few sessions in the institutions. A lot of the times when the FASD sessions were done, the people had aha moments where they were like, I like that sounds like me. And in that way, it's not only an information session. We've done liquid smudge workshops with them in there to help them, get connected to the culture as well.
So let's talk about the prevalence of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. How do we understand the current prevalence in the general population and then in Indigenous people and communities?
So currently, 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. 1 in 10 Indigenous people in Canada have fetal al They say that a conservative estimate is 4% of the population in Canada. And that's really probably an underestimate because there are challenges with identifying individuals who have been impacted by alcohol prenatally and maybe fall within the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So part of that is recognition. So like I said, they don't maybe sometimes get identified or as having any issues until they get into the school system. And so a lot of times it just gets sort of brushed off as behavior problems, behavior issues. So then they're falling through the cracks. They're not getting diagnosed sometimes when they should be. A lot of times people don't want to talk about it. So when you go into communities and you talk to people about alcohol and pregnancy, they don't want to really talk about it a lot of times. They don't want to maybe admit that they possibly have had an influence on their children as far as development and the things that they might have ingested. And for us as Indigenous people, it's a bit of a challenge to get us to engage in research because, first of all, we've been sort of researched more than is comfortable. And so we've lost that willingness to engage in research and to have people study our communities and look at those uncomfortable situations because we've been really stigmatized as far as alcohol goes. And so one thing that I do like to say is that it's not an Indigenous problem and that we do have more Indigenous people now not ever touching alcohol than any other populations. And so kind of moving away from that negative stereotyping and stigma and giving us an opportunity to really look at what's going on and helping us rather than saying, oh, let's just use this as making it look like an Indigenous problem. So
It's a struggle for us because we aren't able to just get a medical brain scan and say this individual has FASD. It takes a whole team to come up with the diagnosis. And one of the initial requests was their prenatal alcohol exposure, because the only way you can get FASD is if the fetus has had prenatal alcohol exposure. And so, as Lynda had mentioned earlier, when our populations of FASD have been through the system and may not know the biological mother, then it again is a barrier for that person who's been living with FASD. So it's not just an easy test. With the FASD, it's a struggle. And that's where it's hard for us to, like, we still have that battle of engaging on the prevalence. That if a lot of advocates say if there's alcohol in a society, you're going to have FASD. And I just heard yesterday from a doctor, if there's trauma, there's mostly always addictions, always. So those are very strong statements, and we have to realize how we can harm reduce to help with that prevalence. And the way in which our program is unique is because we use our culture at the center. And so by engaging our moms and our fathers and our caregivers and our families to do those ceremonies, to have the naming ceremony, have the first bath cedar water, to get our clans, our colors, our helpers, all in those beginnings, to retrieve the placenta, to have the nokomis, an important part of raising that new life, to have all family members there, aunties, uncles, cousins, neighbors, everybody, all our brothers and sisters, all our relations present, so that we can give that pure spirit, that pure being, a wonderful start. And then, as again, that lifespan comes into effect, helping them to go on their rites of passage. And engaging all family members, in what our culture is and our Anishinaabe language and our traditions of powwow and connection to the earth and our foods and harvesting, and all of that just helps with that harm reduction and that prevalence of FASD.
After the break, Chochi and Lynda will share how the Anishinaabe Nation FASD program helps with community healing from intergenerational trauma and the restoration of Anishinaabe-informed parenting, and why it's so important for them to advocate for equitable services for people living with FASD. This fall, your learning journey begins at Kenjigawinteg, an accredited Anishinaabe place of learning on Manitoulin Island. Programs starting this September include welding, construction carpentry, pre-health sciences, PSW, Indigenous wellness and addictions prevention, and ECE Anishinaabe. Application deadlines start August 7th. Don't wait, apply today. Visit kenjigawinteg.ca. Kenjigawinteg, rooted in tradition, growing in knowledge. So that's interesting. So you're describing how a solid foundation in our Anishinaabe culture and our teachings is an important part of this education and awareness and prevention. That sounds like such an important way of going about it, and yet I can also see that it's the work of healing from intergenerational trauma, where we have generations who didn't experience these kind of things you're mentioning, the ceremonies or the close family involvement or language or cultural practices. Does that come into your discussions or into your work?
Absolutely. And I think that oftentimes that's what our sessions end up being, a bit more of a healing and revitalizing those practices. So that's really what our workshops tend to be about, is the trauma in our communities has disconnected us so much from ourselves and from maybe a developing baby and from each other, that's what's leading to what we see as far as the addictions. And so if we want to get away from those, and this is according to Dr. Gabor Mate, and he says, what he freely admits is Indigenous knowledge, is that we need to get back to that connection to everything in the environment, to each other. And so we try to encourage and help parents to establish that connection. And so we do something called Creating Our Feast Bundle. And we've been doing that for many, many years now. And we talk about the berry fast, one of the child welfare organizations here in Thunder Bay, Delico. They're encouraging people to take their berry fast. So they have this group of women now who are starting out on their berry fast. And I thought, we've contributed to that, because when we started to do the Feast Bundle workshops, people weren't talking about berry fast. And so the elder now who's encouraging women to do their berry fast and helping them through it was in one of our very first Feast Bundle workshops years ago. So we are having an impact and influencing communities in that way, I think. So just something that I wanted to mention was that oftentimes I'll talk about historically Native parents. So I did see this old write-up. It was like a journal entry from many, many years ago at First Contact, it seemed like. And they were talking about what they saw of Native parents. And they saw Native parents who never got angry and whose children never had to cry for anything because they had everything that they needed and wanted. And so when we talk about going back to the culture, and people might joke about it and say, oh yeah, what do you want to do, live in teepees and stuff? And I say, no. We want to go back to a point where our Native parents are calm and that our children have everything that they need and they don't have to want for anything, or they don't have to cry for the things that they need. And how we accepted individuals who were different. And so they were honored and they were thought of as gifts from the Creator. And I think that we went through a period where we saw them as problems and trouble, and how do we deal with this child? And I'd like to just see us accept everybody for who they are and work with what they bring to us as their gifts. And so I like the move toward looking at things as neurodivergent rather than the FASD, autism. When we look at children, youth, individuals who come to us as different and as living in the world in a different way, and how best to help them to live the life that they are here and faced with in the best way that we can.
And at the Anishinaabe Nation, those initial workers that started this fetal alcohol spectrum disorder program, they came up with this beautiful word in the language, Bawidokagejik, and that means carrier of gifts. And we're trying to bring that back so that, it was just such a wonderful way of talking about these individuals, giving them a great name that they are. And that's what we talked about earlier, about that it's not just things that they're living with that are hard to deal with because of the impairments. They also have so many gifts to give us. They're wonderful storytellers. They're great with younger ages. They're wonderful with animals. They're very connected spiritually. And like Lynda said as well, they trust, they have a lot of trust with those that are around them. It's not that you have to be granted or build on that. They trust people. And there are so many wonderful traits that individuals with FASD have as well that present themselves throughout the life cycle. And as Anishinaabe people, they connect heavily to their culture, and we regard them as individuals that can help us learn better as well. And so we need to pull on FASD individuals, or Bawidokagejik, carrier of gifts. We need to pull on their strengths and look to them for teachings, and tying that into with what we were talking about with the prevalence and the lifespan. It's just everything is so in tune with that medicine wheel teaching, that it's just continuous, and that we as women, we have that first water. We have the ability to bring that new life in, but we also have our eggs for our lifespan. And so we try and connect our young families that you're not only bringing that new life in, but you're also being mindful of those are your grandchildren one day as well. Because if you're having a daughter, she's developing her reproductive organs and her eggs that she'll have for her life that you already have inside you while you're bringing that daughter. I have two daughters, and so it's very, to know that I helped in creating those good little spirits for one day as well. Yeah, it's very powerful.
I'm curious, how do young people react when they receive such a profound teaching about how what they do today really impacts future generations?
Well, I can speak to one of my communities from when I first, we share our sessions and our teachings. And when I first started the feast bundle session that Lynda and Lynn formulated, I went down to one of my very Western communities. So the first day I got there, we did a youth feast bundle session, and we talked about those rites of passage. And then the next morning we do either baby moccasin or breastfeeding pillow, and then the next day we would do the full day moss bag session that we have for teachings of a healthy pregnancy. And that feast bundle session, the next day, there were mothers and fathers and caregivers coming in, and they were saying, I need to know how to help my child get to do their rites of passage. They want to do their vision quests. They want to do their berry fast. So they were receptive in that way that it was presented to them. And then they're already taking initiative, talking to their caregiver that I want to do this and how do I go about doing it? So absolutely, the younger population's very receptive in knowing and taking it in and putting it into action.
Have you noticed the same thing, Lynda?
Yes, for sure. When I see things like I saw on the internet the other day where they're all sitting around a table and learning about engaging in their berry fast. Like those things didn't happen in this area. So that's good to see.
You mentioned earlier how you had programming for the like families and parents. So you're talking about, parental roles. Can you talk about how you're doing work with fathers as well?
We had years ago a new father's driving manual that was pretty popular and a lot of fun. And so encouraging fathers to engage and understand. We talk about the importance of dads. And so sometimes I don't know that men recognize how important they are in life in general, but in fatherhood also, in parenthood, that they just think maybe that they're not necessary. So many years ago, fathers, they would try to join in on programs and they would be left on the outskirts of the program while the mom and the children are engaged. And now that's changed where they're encouraging fathers to participate more and stuff. So that's a very positive change. But like I said, we promote an understanding that fathers and mothers are pregnant together. So it's not just a woman's issue and a responsibility, that the men have a responsibility too. So the men have a responsibility to make sure that the mother has everything that she needs to have a calm and healthy pregnancy, so that she has the food that she needs, so that she has a quiet, safe environment, so that the baby can develop in that type of an environment free of stress, because stress can also harm a developing baby. So we encourage it. And I think that we see, like I said, more dads are engaging in programs. Here we have a Father's Day event where the dads come out and we give them prizes and have a barbecue for them and stuff to really show that we honor them and that they have a very important role. And Chochi had mentioned previously about the vision quest for young boys. So when we started to deliver the feast bundle session, it was all about the berry fast and the rites of passage for the young girl, and that she's learning to say no to things that could harm her baby, like alcohol and stuff during pregnancy. And so then they said, like, what about the dads? Where's the dads? And so we started to look at what was happening with the dads and the young men. And so they would engage in what was called a vision quest. And in that vision quest, they would look for a dream or vision to tell them where their life was going to go from that point on. And there's a cute little story that somebody had shared with me called The Boy Who Dreamed of an Acorn. And so I share that story in my workshop, and it's about 3 boys that go on their vision quest, and one dreams of a bear and how important bears are, their protection, and they're strong and they're good hunters. And so when a boy dreams of a bear, that's such a wonderful thing. And then one of the boys dreamed of an eagle, and everybody wants to be an eagle. They can see far, they carry our prayers to their creator, and how wonderful that is. And the community celebrates, and everybody's happy. And then the third boy, he dreamed of an acorn. And so he was really disappointed in his dream, and he started to wonder, what's that all about? An acorn. So we talked to the elder, and the elder told him to plant it and to watch it over the years. And so still took many years for him of disappointment, to finally get to this big, beautiful tree that supported people. So people, the animals, even the mighty eagle, would go and rest on the branch, and the bear would go and scratch its back on the trunk, and the people would sit under the shade. So it provided support. So when you think about people like that, there are elders in our community, and there are our teachers and our parents. And so recognizing that everybody, even though they might think what their lot in life isn't very important. So I like to use that story for our youth, especially our young men, but all youth, when they think that they're so tiny and insignificant and they don't have anything to offer to the world, to remember that something that looks so tiny and insignificant can become so big and beautiful and important. So just stories like that, storytelling is a big part of the work that we do, and trying to encourage people to identify their gifts and appreciate them, and to carry them on and to provide them to their children, our children. And so one of the workshops that we do is little baby moccasin making, and it's called, I think that you had said this earlier, Lisa, providing a solid foundation for life's journey. So what do our children need to walk a good path on this earth, and how do we provide for those needs?
Miigwech for sharing that teaching, Lynda. Chochi, on camera, I saw you really nodding when Lynda talked about how men need to understand, the importance of their role.
Yeah, that acknowledgement that they are protectors and providers of the mother, of the children, of their family, and having that in mind. And that's why men, when they're promoting life, they don't usually hunt. They're not usually taking life. So it's the responsibility again of that community, that extended family, to provide that nourishment for that family that's expecting. And what also comes to mind, that baby is inside their mother and they're consistently hearing that heartbeat. And the father, we see so many dads, right? So many men, young men, picking up and drumming, and they have that ability to continue that heartbeat on, that it's not only a mother and a baby connection, it's also the father and those children, that connection of that teaching with the drum. And like, to see the shift because of how long Lynda and I have been doing our sessions and working in this line of work, there was a family and the mother cared for the baby. They had a newborn baby and they were at a moss bag session. And the father, who is a sewer and makes the regalia for the family, he made the moss bag for their baby. And then another community I had, and the father was from one of our communities, but the mother wasn't. And so he attended the session for his partner and for his new baby that was coming, and made those new baby moccasins for their baby coming. And then we did that in the morning, and then the afternoon we were making breastfeeding pillows. And the mums that were there and the community worker said, why don't you stay and make the breastfeeding pillow for your partner as well, to encourage that breastfeeding. And so then he stayed and he made that breastfeeding pillow for his partner as well. So it's definitely, we just see the blossoming in our communities of the understanding and, of healthy families.
An important part of your program is also advocacy. What are the most important areas that you're advocating in?
The biggest area, I think, is that equality, that they're getting the same amount of support, of understanding, of an equal education, an equal work experience, being acknowledged. And that's not necessarily that everybody's going to get the same. It's that we're going to make sure that everybody's at the level where they can achieve, where they can be successful, where they feel empowered as a person, and so someone might need audio or visual supports in order for understanding, or they might need the lighting, or they might need to be outside with nature, or it's such a range of what an individual's needs may be for FASD. So we help to advocate for that. When I go down to my Southwest communities, we have such a huge geographical area, right, that we cover. We're very limited with our funding and resources that we have within FASD. And so to help with cost, I usually book a couple sessions at a time. We also allow ourselves to have whatever session is needed or requested. We base our presentation or our workshop around that. So we accommodate to, let's say, with teachers, they only have the lunch hour to do it. Or educators, they only have PD, professional development days that they're able to, or they're looking for either a half a day or a full day session. If we're granted an hour, if we're granted 20 minutes, if we're granted a day or 2 days, we will do our best to meet the needs of that community. And we also try to help in terms, because it touches on all of the areas, right? Justice, social, education, family, like community. It's an individual with FASD has all of those areas that it needs support. And so if they reach out to us, we will do our best to help them with wherever they need strengthening. We as a team are also all active in committees and networking as well within our, means with where our office is located, but also within our region. So we are connected in that way. And luckily now too, we have so many options with doing it virtually. I used to go up to Barrie to attend Simcoe Muskoka Prevention Committee meeting, and now we can do it virtually.
For me, I think that it's about resources too. When Chochi talks about sitting on committees and stuff, it's about pooling resources. So our program hasn't really had a lot of funding and in fact hasn't had their funding change for many, many years. So no increases, although everything else is increasing, our funding hasn't increased. So it's very important to collaborate and establish those working relationships so that we can provide the best services to our community with the limited resources. And then another thing is stigma. So like I had said, that it sometimes people make it seem like an Indigenous problem. Well, I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but if I'm going somewhere where they think that I'm the problem, I'm not going to feel too good about accessing services or anything. So trying to reduce that stigma and to have people look at Native people, Indigenous people in a different way, and working toward truth and reconciliation. So that's the approach that we take from this site, is to work together with both other Indigenous organizations and non-Indigenous organizations.
And I think our conference is a great way to empower the community or the caregiver or the individual with FASD, because we give them a platform that they're able to voice. They're able to let people know their struggles or their gifts or whatever they want to share about what they're going through. And the connection, the ability to network and connect and create a bigger FASD community.
When does your conference take place? Is that an annual FASD conference?
It's not annual, but we're hoping to have one not this fiscal year, but next fiscal year again. And this year we're going to focus on the different regions. So we're hoping to bring a smaller workshop into each of the 4 regions. So Chochi is going to be kicking it off in August, and then I will have something going on in the Northern Superior region in September, and then we'll be looking at planning for the other regions.
All right, because September 9th is International FASD Day, and then September itself is FASD Awareness Month.
And they've taken the shift to FASD Awareness Month from that initial September 9th date, because the education and prevention is working for those that have been in this field, and those that spearheaded the initiatives. It's just, we can't do it all on one day because there's so much happening all over, and then it doesn't limit us. So it's just been one of our biggest successes in FASD, is that it's turned into an FASD Awareness Month.
Okay. Is there anything else we should chat about, especially since we want to make sure this is really helping raise awareness during FASD Awareness Month?
We've covered a lot.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it down into one podcast session. Like, it would be easier to be in a series for FASD, because we could be talking about those highlighted areas. We could talk about each of those in one session, the justice and the education, and then having that, because it's just such a huge topic, and they really need our care and they really need our support. And It's hard because people think alcohol's been around. Everybody knows not to drink, but we're still having babies with FASD. FASD is still there. It's not something that's going away in terms of addictions and trauma within our communities and within our nation. So we need to still give it the recognition that it deserves and lean on these people and these families and these caregivers and these individuals that live with this every day, that they need our supports everywhere. And I saw this wonderful cartoon or image, and it showed a child in a wheelchair, and they were going into school, and the custodian was shoveling off the stairs because there was all kinds of children trying to get into the school. And the individual in the wheelchair said, "Why don't you shovel off the ramp?" And he said, "I'll get to that next. I'm just shoveling the stairs first so I can get more people through." And the individual in the wheelchair said, "Well, if you shoveled off the ramp, everyone could get through." So making those accommodations is not necessarily just beneficial for that individual with the neurodivergence, with FASD. It works for everybody. Creating that holistic, equal opportunity and life for everyone. Using our 7 grandfather teachings and understanding how FASD affects those individuals and how we need to support them.
And so when we advocate, we're advocating for every child as an important human being, and that we need to do our best to, like Chochi had said, support them and make sure that they have their needs met and that we're looking at them as important individuals with gifts.
As you can see from, when we talked about diagnostic clinics and services available and advocacy, we have a massive wish list for those families, those individuals with FASD. We would love to have a mobile FASD diagnostic so then people don't have to leave their communities, that we would have the ability, for that diagnosis center to come right into all of our 39 communities and to alleviate what we're trying to do, that stigma. The wish list is huge of the future of our program and of what we would love to see. So the work isn't done.
Miigwech, anything you'd like to add to that, Lynda?
I'm just talking about the support of the chiefs, so that they've been very supportive along this FASD journey, and that is continuing.
Okay, well, miigwech to Chochi Knott and to Lynda Banning for taking part in the podcast. Miigwech.
Miigwech for having us.
Miigwech.
Miigwech to the Anishinaabe Nation Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Program for supporting this episode. As mentioned, September is International FASD Awareness Month, and the theme for 2025 is Everyone Plays a Part, Take Action, as each of us has a role to play in creating a society that supports individuals with FASD and promotes healthy pregnancies. There will be FASD awareness events throughout September in many communities. In North Bay, the 4th annual Mayingan Family Road Race for FASD awareness will take place on September 6th at the waterfront Kiwanis Bandshell. This fun family event will get everyone moving while learning about and reducing the stigma associated with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Chochi will be participating in an FASD community gathering and move-a-thon at Surrey Place in Toronto on September 7th and presenting on September 9th in Wata with Moose Deer Point First Nation. The Simcoe County FASD Prevention Committee is hosting an FASD Awareness Day on September 10th at Barrie City Hall, featuring Choir Revolution, an interactive singing experience. The Anishinabek Nation FASD program is also organizing the Boedo Kagejig Northern Superior Regional FASD Gathering on September 11th at the Superior Inn and Conference Center in Thunder Bay. This day of learning and networking will feature a keynote and panel presentations. To learn more about the Anishinaabe Nation FASD program and other upcoming FASD awareness events, find the links in the podcast description. This episode includes the tracks Mino Pimatsuin by Nigel Irwin and Chippewa Travelers, and I've Got Feelings by Justin Delorme, licensed by Nagamo Publishing. Chimigwech for listening to Bamadza J Ganonindwa. Until next time, Bama P.